Hello everyone, I'm Silent. This is the second part of the Silent Hill 2 Remake devlog. In the last video we stopped at the second location, which would have to be completely remade since it was not intended for a first or third person view. There is simply no landscape behind the camera. As I said before, I will not give up on this and I need this as a project so that I could learn Unreal Engine 5. In this video I'll show you my progress, but I can already tell you that I made a lot of progress in these 2 weeks. But before we start I will say a few things. I apologize that it's been 2 weeks since the first video. The problem is I'm disabled and sometimes I didn't have the strength to continue, and also learning from scratch takes up most of the development time, but I will try to make video updates more often, weekly probably, although the videos can be short, like 10 minutes long. Also in my Discord I posted daily updates of my progress. You can join Discord for updates and news or just to chat. The second thing is a lot of people watched the last video, a lot of good comments, but there were also many negative ones. People called me names, a couple of people texted me that I should stop developing altogether. Apparently people expect something from me, I don't know. I just started learning game development from scratch by watching YouTube videos and decided to post my progress on YouTube. And it's weird that people tell me to stop. I'm not going to monetize anything and this is not possible on my channel anyway. And the last thing is the official remake of Silent Hill 2. There are rumors and some screenshots were posted yesterday. I don't know if I can show screenshots here, but this is really cool. It will be great to see and compare how the professionals will remake the game. Well, if those rumors are true, of course. I hope the game will have all the options that I added to my project and we won't have to wait for mods like with Resident Evil 2 and its first-person mode, for example. Well, let's get started. As usual, I added lighting to the map, in this case the sun. And first of all, we will make a landscape, the most difficult part. I decided not to keep only the classic camera as people told me, but to remake this map for a new first and third person perspective. As you can see, where the camera was placed there are simply no hills and no road. To solve this problem I had to learn the landscape design tools in Unreal Engine 5. Also I needed for my other personal project where the main idea is based around the piece of landscape. I watched a lot of tutorials for this and I used to imagine before that developers are sculpting the landscapes. It turned out to be true and it's really easy in Unreal Engine 5. I'll show you how I made the new landscape, but please don't laugh. Of course I had to remove the old landscape first, then make a completely new one, fit it under the tunnel and remove unnecessary parts. And all the tools were needed for this, which is very useful for learning, and that's the result. Next I had to decorate this terrible hill. I needed the textures of the soil and cliffs, and for this I learned how to make more advanced material for painting landscapes. Looks bad, but I thought it would be a good base for this hill. Next we need to plant some vegetation on this abomination. So for this I had to learn new tools to work with foliage. And again, I learned a lot from this. I also needed to replace the pictures of trees with real ones with megascans, and for all of this I needed the models of bushes and trees, etc. I also decided to take Wixel megascans, but there was only a different type of trees. After that I realized that this would still be a suitable replacement, because if you look at the photo of the area you can see that such trees are exactly what we need. So everything is authentic, at least I convinced myself that it is. Then I googled this and I found information about the real life place that inspired the developers to make this location, and so those trees are a really suitable replacement I think, although they are not as sharp and threatening by design as the original ones. Well, and I have to use free trees anyway. So while I was doing all of this I also studied Google photos of what the forests and rocks look like, because as a real gamer I never leave my house, and I've heard that the game designers of such horror games have to study a lot of nasty reference to build up a world like this. I'm sure it was the same for Silent Hill 2 devs. Then I began to realize that with all the megascans of trees and vegetation the hill would just look empty. Therefore I added some cliffs and rocks and after that foliage. And that's the result. Yes, it's embarrassing, but I've tried. So we have some rocks, cliffs, forest above and some trees below, with a couple of vantage points for crying. I also made a small path where you can go to Silent Hill from this map. It can be seen from above. And then it was necessary to close the exit on the road, because in the original game James couldn't get through the fog. By doing this I also learned how to make different types of fog. Here I just placed a wall of fog, but now I think this was an oversight. It would be better if I extended the rocks a little further and made the fog 2 times lower. It's easy to fix, but I don't know if it's worth it or if it suits the plot of the game. Then the second most difficult part began: the lake and land on the horizon. It was necessary to replace the photo. There were several solutions for that. First, make a skybox with a lake in the distance, or just leave a photo. I decided that both solutions are very cheap and the skybox looks just awful. And I always liked the ideas in first Alan Wake, where you could always see the landscape in the distance and also where you would go next. It just gives player a sense of world scale. Therefore I decided to make a real lake and land in the distance. And for this I learned to work with water. In Unreal Engine 5 there is a new experimental plugin, version 0.1 I think. It works just great when it works at all, so I made a lake with dark water with this plugin. Then I learned how to make a fog that moves, as it was in the Silent Hill 2. Every fog in this scene uses modern technology, unlike Silent Hill 2, and yes, ray tracing, shadows and lighting are also enabled on this map. I like how volumetric fog looks. Next thing was to make the land in the distance. First I just made some terrain with a texture, and when I looked through the fog I decided to leave it like that. Although I think it's worth adding the outlines of the buildings. I tried to add some foliage there, but you can't see it through the fog anyway. And it seems to me that such fog is suitable in this case, because it feels like this was the idea in the original game. Well, maybe the fog would not be so thick and low quality buildings would be visible on the horizon, but there were hardware limitations at that time, and I also have some restrictions because I don't have any budget and I haven't studied Blender yet to make low quality buildings. Well, then it was the time to refine the map, fix various problems and add some game mechanics. First of all, I upscaled all the textures just like in the first video, made a lot of problems obvious. This texture of the road looks just terrible. Also, the fence model on the tunnel gates was missing, the lines on the road and the parking lot were not imported either. Some unnecessary models were imported, sometimes there were no textures, and most importantly the toilets. This is how they looked in the original game. This should have been fixed immediately. I think you have already understood why I should not be a 3D artist, but now you will see another reason for this. I spent a whole day fixing every little detail on this map. I've added a new fence mesh, fitted it to each part of the gate, so I learned to work with transparent materials. Then I cleared the entire map of unnecessary 3D models, added some details to the corner with a dumpster. I had to learn how to work with digs, added lines to the road and parking lot. I also studied 3D modeling a little in Unreal Engine 5, there are tools for this. Redesigned missing back of the toilet building, and that's why I shouldn't be a 3D artist, because I even started fixing all the details on the roof of the toilet, like those pipes and textures that the player wouldn't even be able to see. And here I was already carried away and I wanted to furnish the whole map with new details and 3D assets from Quixel. But I had to stop, so I just added a trash can here to close the passage. That's why I also put a cone here to warn people, and I also added cones on the road, fixed the whole fence, and then it was necessary to replace a texture in the parking lot. I used to have a placeholder texture there, but as you can see in the original game, all the textures are made dirty and disgusting. This is part of the great design of the world. I really hope that developers will follow such design in the official remake and that they understand why Silent Hill is so good. And I had to use Quixel again. I found a more or less suitable texture and of course it was too clean. I studied more materials and digs, started to place splashes and dirt here and there. It ain't much, but it's honest work. Well, at least I tried again. After all this, I had to add post-processing. I tried to lower fog density, but Unreal Engine 5 crashed once or twice, or more like 36 times in 2 weeks. In any case, this is all easy to fix and tweak later. It actually takes a few minutes. I tried to recreate the colors as in the original game, but I still don't know how to work with color correction and post-processing, but I'm going to learn it. So far I just tweaked the brightness and contrast and found the option for a lookup table table. This would allow to transfer the color palette from the original game, so I read how to do this in Unreal Engine, and so far, yeah. All this helped me a lot with my learning process in Unreal Engine. In the future, developing games with these tools should be much faster because now I know how it works, and by making many mistakes along the way I also learned a lot. But now for the easy part, programming, I fixed many small bugs. For example, running backwards was possible, and I think a good developer would not allow such thing. Then I added a map in the car. It has a special material with glowing, which could help new players. But think about it, how do you make the interaction with the item? There are 3 camera types in the game. If you just make a cube around the item, then when you're entering this cube, the game will read the action button press. What if the player is not looking at the item? He will still pick it up, and constantly checking which way the character is facing is also expensive. And what if there are several items around? I don't know how real developers make those interactions, what are the real solutions, but I made it with a raycast, so that James shoots a beam from his eyes when you press action button. This technique is used everywhere as far as I know. Sounds easy, you look at the map item, press the key, and your character shoots a beam, and the game understands that you want to interact. Well, and it checks if this item has such an option to interact. But again, there are 3 camera types in the game. In third person, without a crosshair, aiming at objects will be difficult and stupid. And with a classic camera, you can't aim at all. Although visually, character will turn his head toward the object as it was in the original game. For the solution, I made the map just a visual item, and the tall cube around it will actually read the heat of the ray. And it solves all the problems. Calculation occurs only at the moment when you press the action button, and now there is a dim light in the car. By the way, a new Saints Row was recently released, and I noticed how interaction is made there. For example, the game simultaneously checks to see if the third-person camera is looking at the car you want to enter, and if the actual character model looking at it. That is, they check 2 beams at once, and if at least one looks at the car, then the character will interact with it. And if you will just stand close with your back to the car and turn the camera away, then the interaction won't work. Well, then I started making menu and interface prototypes. So far only prototypes, but the menus themselves are very easy to make. The main thing is to make the design and find the right fonts from the original game. If you have interesting ideas about design, I'm open to suggestions. I also made a text channel in Discord for your ideas. First of all, I made a prototype of the menu that I talked about in the last video. Quick settings menu, here you can add a tab with accessibility settings, colorblind features for example. So far I have added sliders for field of view and camera distance. Such a menu would also be useful for gamepads. Instead of many buttons, a small menu to set everything up just once, and you can still see the game real time. Next thing is the main menu. I thought about how to make it. There were 2 choices. I personally wanted to recreate the original menu. 2D background, some buttons, and a knife as a cursor. The second option is a modern menu with a 3D background. I still choose the second option because it has huge advantages. It looks meh, but there are no fonts yet. I thought about making the text on the left, but decided to center it like in other Japanese games. So what are the benefits? The first one, it is a really complete actual scene from the game, and it's heavy on your PC. Thus you can immediately adjust the graphics from the main menu and see the changes and your FPS. The second is the atmosphere of the game. At the beginning there will be this scene, but when you get to Silent Hill, there will be Silent Hill in the background. The game can check your save file and set the appropriate scene as background to reflect your progress when you launch the game and reflect how the character is immersed in the further madness that is taking place. I would really like one of the scenes to be a dark hospital corridor with a nurse. You know, that twitchy animation, and then maybe unnerving scenes from Otherworld, etc. All of this is very easy to make. As for design of the buttons, I also don't know yet. In the original game, buttons were black with a white glow, as if empty. If anyone has ideas for design, feel free to write an essay in Discord. I'm happy to read your suggestions. And so far I managed to learn a lot while developing this level. I actually recommend everyone to really develop your own project for learning. When faced with unusual problems, you find solutions, and this is a great experience, better than just tutorials. Well, and a lot of people texted me about what an idiot I am, that I added Shrek to the game, that he doesn't belong here, that I don't even know the name of the main character. These are people who didn't understand the joke. So just for you, now this is not a joke. After choosing the difficulty of the puzzles and the game, I made the character selection menu. And yes, he's twerking. Also, every time you hover over it, it will change his name, and the name is chosen randomly from a huge list. And you know what? James is not on the list.